All right, so Brian, let's get into a little law here. We were talking off camera a little bit. When you mentioned summary judgment, just so our audience understands, that's a process that before a case even goes to trial, where in this case, the defense would have filed a motion saying, you should throw this case out, Judge, because there's no basis in fact or law to bring the case. The judge did not do that to the point that you were making now. Just so they're clear, the standard there is that the judge must give all favorable inferences to the opposing party, which would be the plaintiff. And when all the plaintiff's testimony comes in, the defense will then be able to make another motion, same kind of motion, it's not called summary judgment, but the judge no longer gives all the favorable inferences to the plaintiff at that point in time. So we'll see about that down the road. And we also talked about, you know, I personally think it's a little tangential to be suing the hospital. I'm thinking to myself, why not child services? They're the ones responsible for the investigation. It took a long time. Our producers are looking into that right now to find out if we have an answer to it. But if you want to talk about any one of those two principles.
So for both, the reason why I think that, I hear what you're saying, why not go to child services, why have to go to the hospital? Whenever it comes to negligence or any claim like that, one of the big elements of it, the question is, do I have a duty to you? If you and I are walking down the street and someone trips and falls in front of us, they can't sue us for not helping them. I don't have a duty to that person. Now, Bob, you're a great guy. You probably actually will help the person. I hear you save dogs on the side of the street as well. But it's all about duty. So for here, if the hospital had the argument of, I don't have a duty to you in the sense of investigating this properly, I made the report, I handed it off, and it's the people who I handed it off to that have a duty to you, go for them for negligence. Even but the lower standard, I would assume that this case would have been thrown out. So I'm making the assumption. I don't have all the answers, but I'm just looking at how cases progress and how summary judgment progresses and how negligence operates in terms of you have to attack the person that has the duty. I'm not a civil attorney. I just do a little bit on the side, but I do mainly criminal. But to answer your question as to why not go up to the social services, it, to me, rings true for when my clients say, this person made a false allegation against me. They said that I sexually assaulted them. They said that I stalked them. Crimes that you can't prove, you're just using someone's word. Person gets arrested, they're in jail for a couple of days, weeks, months, whatever it is, and they say, you know what, not only do I want to sue the person who made the false allegations against me, I want to sue the police. And the police would typically have immunity because they say, whoa, 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 whoa. Our job is to take the reports, arrest the person, bring them to the criminal justice system, and then the process continues. We had a verified report that abuse happened, so we arrested the person, and then the process continued. And then we say, we're immune from this, we shouldn't be sued. I think the child services might have the same argument to say the hospital reports, we took a credible source of information from John Hopkins Hospital, and we went through the process of investigating, and unfortunately, in that process, the mother committed suicide, but we have no duty to her. That's why I think you might not be able to go after the child services, but I think an expert in this field might have a better answer.
Yeah, actually, our producer, Brian, where you were given that a statement, and I'll throw this to you, Sonny, I'm going to read it to you. The family settled with DCF Suncoast Center, which is the child abuse center, and the child abuse pediatrician, who once worked for the center but is no longer employed by the organization, and DCF Suncoast Center is family services. So as would be typical, and Brian, we all know this, the lawyers are forced, a lot of people get upset with this, that they sue anyone who could have any responsibility in the chain of command. But it appears, Sonny, here that there was, in fact, a lawsuit and it's settled, and that's why we only see the hospital as a defendant in this case. Thoughts?
So I was also thinking about that, and both of you brought out really great points. At the hospital, don't forget there is also a social worker, like the social worker, Ms. Hansen, that testified yesterday. Also, there's a multidisciplinary team that is involved in these cases and in hospital settings. So when the allegations and everything happens at the hospital, there is a medical component. The law enforcement component has already been removed from this because it only involves the hospital, child protective services, and the components of social work and that particular aspect that you then pull together, which is the reason why they settle, because it is their report and part of their responsibility in conjunction with the hospital and medical team to make these decisions about the actions that go ultimately to the case, to the courts.
Yeah, so, you know, Brian, now that we we know this, right? It would make sense that they would sue everybody. They made, the division made a decision, probably they can't get past immunity. Immunity is not an absolute bar, but it's a hurdle. And they decided to do a cost-benefit analysis. Better to, to get rid of the case. Going though to just something that I noticed in my career, and I'm curious about if you've seen it in yours and thoughts. What happens in my mind with these things is a lot of people want to attach nefarious motives. I think people don't realize how the system is so messed up and how sometimes it's just the Eli Whitney gin of case dispositions, and there's not critical thought that's going into it. It's not necessarily mean-spirited, it's just the way it is. We used to call it criminal claims adjusting for prosecutors. But what I've noticed too is that when the division gets, and this may go to a little bit of your point, a medical opinion that this is what's going on, they're going to accept that medical opinion. It carries a lot of weight, these experts, and I can't count on how many times, in my opinion, people have been falsely convicted or accused of something, either because of false identification. To me, these are the number one way. And number two, by having expert testimony that's wrong, but it's so powerful, the investigators just accept it, hook, line, and sinker.
Okay. Were you informed that they plan to test her as to whether she could actually get up and walk around by placing the commode just out of reach?
Objection, predicate, and foundation.
Overruled.
It was the commode and also the phone. They would ring the phone, see if she would answer the phone.
Were both of those
reach?
And both of those were out of reach?
Yes.
Had you been asked about this, would you have given consent or told no?
Absolutely not.
Sonny, back in the day when I was doing some civil work, and I was always worried about the jurors who have this animus, dislike, hatred for the filing of civil suits against places like hospitals. They know that in the end analysis, this increases cost, insurance costs, malpractice premiums, things of that nature. How worried would the plaintiffs be in a scenario like that a jurors could just sit there and say, hey, look, they did what they were supposed to do legally, maybe they made some mistakes or whatever, but I'm not putting the blame on them, this is just a frivolous lawsuit?
I think they do have to think about it. It has to come to mind, because this is the reality. We have to focus on evidence, facts, and then the reality of how people might see this happening, play out, and depending on what their personal circumstances have been with these type of institutions. So they do have to consider all things and everything.
Yeah, it's just something that you do all the voir dire that you can, and you just never know that you get a couple of jurors that just won't go with it because they just think that everybody's trying to do the right thing, and it just turned out to be a bad result.